Hi Internet, my name is Tim Downs and this is part 1 of 2 videos I'll be uploading demonstrating the new and improved Coolio rig I've made for Blender for free to download and use for animating and posing and whatnot. This is an upgraded version of a rig that I made a little while ago. That's why I'm calling it 2.0 Coolio. So in this first video, I'll be showing just, a basic rundown of what everything does. And then the second video, I'm going to be showing how I made some of this and some of the choices I made and exactly how I aimed to make it a lot better than the original Coolio. So let's get started. We've got a basic center of gravity controller here at the base of the spine and the hips. We've got a spine control that you can translate and rotate. We've got an FK down here at the bottom of the spine, as well as an FK at the middle of the spine, and the top spine control here is essentially the same thing, but you can also translate it for a sort of IK movement you've got with the additional movement of this middle controller here. And you can use both at the same time. They are parented to each other in such a way that you can basically use both without having to switch between FK and IK like you do with the limbs. So you can see here, I'm going to turn off this face layer right now just to easily see the FK-IK switch. And by default, it's set to IK, so you can control the overall, movement of the arm with just the hand. You can move the elbow pull target right here. You've got rotation as well as proper twisting in both FK and IK mode. Switch this over to FK and you've got basic movement like so, as well as the same amount of twisting and rotation for the wrist. Now you'll see here on the hands, I've got some basic finger rigging going on here that have these basic controls that will bend the fingers entirely all the way down, but you can also rotate the knuckles individually if you need to. And we have the thumb here. You can move the base as well as the two joints, and a finger spread control just so you can spread the fingers out, make them narrower, pretty standard in most rigs. And on the shoulder, you have basic rotation as well as translation, so you can move it around, which is effectively dislocating his shoulder, but because of how simple this model is, it kind of fits in with the sort of cartoony, vague, doughy aesthetic he's got going on for him to be a versatile rig. And speaking of which, we have a tweak layer right here. It is the fourth layer down the line, and these pinkish, purplish, magenta bones are just for tweaking. They have the squash and stretch capabilities similar to the spine. You can move them up and down, and you can scale them up and down so that way you can control the arc of that deformation. Same thing going down at the legs with these tweak bones. You can move them in and out, scale them up and down to control the arc. And as for actually controlling the leg, I kept it IK because I personally never find any use for FK controls on legs. They pretty much always work like an FK, or excuse me, as an IK. So I just kept it like that. There's no switch. You can rotate, move the foot. You can, of course, move the pull target. And we have a controller back here for rolling the foot. And that's basically all there is to the main body controllers. And if you don't like all of these menus here, I've set that up on, I believe, this layer. Yep, so you can just hide that, keep that out of sight. As for the head, it's where things get a little more complicated, a little more interesting. By default, we have, and I should bring back those menus, we have the head tracked to this target in front of it, which also has the same effect on the eyes with this controller right here. If you turn off head tracking, then it hides that target, but you also have this directly manipulated head control at the base, or at the back of the skull. Just for a little bit more variety in how you wish to control it. So now we, to also show how the other menus work, I've set up these two custom properties off to the side up here and pinned it to the menu on the right hand side. If you press N, it'll hide it. If you press N again, it'll bring it back. So I didn't want to clutter up the rig too much with all of these little panels in the UI floating around him, because they're not going to be used all that often, I thought. So I've got them off here. So if you set the eyebrows follow eyes down to 0, you'll see that the eyebrows stay still while the eyes move. Or if you set it to the maximum value, which is just 0.33, because that's how much the eyes are following the target, it'll follow them completely. If you want to reset it to its default value, right click reset to default. And then I'll show what this additional one does in just a second. So I'm going to hide some of these. I'm going to show this face layer that I've set up. So right here, we've got a few things going on. Now, we've got the lip sync panel off here has its own menu. What this does is it will not only open and close the mouth, but it'll also symmetrically narrow or widen the mouth with these different controls via an action constraint. But when you move them on both axes, you get this sort of smooth combination of the two. So that way you can start getting your basic mouth poses right off the bat. So you can sort of get the vowels, like moving your jaw, but also maybe a little bit of like if you're making a T or an E sound with your mouth pose, then you've kind of got that already set up without having to move all of these different controllers or going into the deform layer and moving the lip bones that I've got there that you don't need to control, which is why I've got it hidden in that layer. But if you want a little more control after that, or if you've already set up your initial pose with the lip sync panel over here, you've still got control over the jaw, sort of offset from this. You can also sort of point the chin independently, so that way when you start getting into more extreme poses by moving this controller, which is a main mouth controller, you can move it up and down and it will move along the arc of the head, so you don't have to worry about it on the y-axis. You can move it and it will automatically sort of rotate it on its own via a shrink wrap modifier. The teeth and the tongue will also go along with it, as you can see there. But you can also move the chin, so keep a little bit more of that volume and smooth out that look, or if you want it to be stretched out to sort of exaggerate just how far his mouth is moving, you can do that as well. Now, down here to the more specific controllers on the mouth, of course, you've got the corner of the mouth, and this is all set up with shape keys. So if you move it up, it creates a smile. If you move it down, it creates a frown. Same goes on the other side. So if you set up X mirroring, you can sort of create both sides at once, of course. And then if you move this triangle controller, you can create the open and closed emotional sort of poses, but it doesn't move in any other direction. It's just a little bit of extra control. If we move these middle controllers here, if I can select it, up and down, you get that movement. It's sort of a tweak bone, sort of, but if you move them together, they won't intersect. It looks like they do right now because I've got subdivision set really low, but if you turn it on, if you render this, it'll actually look pretty decent with these two moving together. And in the middle, they pretty much do the same thing, except for the fact that they move on the y-axis. Now, if you move them up and down, it's pretty much the same story as the other bones, but if you move them in and out, you get these different overall mouth shapes. So you can sort of create a pucker by moving them out and then moving the lip sync off to the left, and you get this sort of kissy face. And off here, you've got the cheek puff moving in and out. And let's see, what else is there? If you take a look inside the mouth, we've got the teeth controllers. And if you move them, they will also conform to the curvature of the head, sort of invisibly, so it has a shrink wrap modifier on here. If you move the tongue deformers, you've got some stretchiness to the tongue, as well as some volume preservation. But if you move it really far out, you can still scale the tongue so that way it maintains a little bit more of that volume. The further out you stretch it. And you can, of course, move the eyes and eyebrows independently, and they are also shrink wrap modified to the head. So no matter what you do to the mouth or the cheeks, the eyes and the eyebrows will always sort of stay on the surface of the head. And the same goes for these controllers for the actual eyebrows themselves. So when you create a sort of emotional pose of the eyebrows, you still get them on the surface of the head. It's slightly turned down so that way if there is any clipping, you can still sort of move it in and out. But I think it works pretty fine as is. So that's pretty much all there is to Coolio 2.0. He is a lot better, as I found. Oh, one more thing I forgot to mention. He also has this controller down up here for when you have the lips follow the jaw. So if you turn that all the way down, sort of creates like a chewing motion. Pretty simple. But if you move it up again to its default value, which is 1, or you can just drag it back up, does the regular open and close mouth movement. So since these two aren't really often used, I decided to save up space on all of this in the rig by just putting them up here, and that's where you'll find them. So that is Coolio 2.0. He's much better, like I said, than the first version, and I'll be going into how exactly in the next video. Feel free to leave a comment on what you like or dislike about this rig if you've used it, if it's better or worse in any way to the first version if you've used both. And of course on my Gumroad, where I'll be uploading him, you can leave a donation if you like, but you obviously don't have to. Otherwise it wouldn't be a donation. But just to show appreciation if you're able or if you want, or to help support me, keep making more rigs with all the time that it takes. But I really wanted to make sure that this was an improvement. And I'm pretty happy with it. So please let me know what you think of it and share anything that you've made with him. I'd love to see whatever fun poses you've made with Coolio or any animation you've actually made with him. I'd love to see that. Again, my name is Tim Downs, and I've been really happy to share this with you. Thank you.